Hello! In this video, we're going to be discussing the Reggio Emilia approach to early childhood education. This approach serves as the foundation of the Ontario kindergarten program and How Does Learning Happen? The two curriculum documents that we use in Ontario to define the way in which we work with young children. So we might as well start at the beginning. Reggio Emilia is a municipality in northern Italy, and they have been lauded as having the best early childhood education programming in the world since the late 80s. The Reggio school started after World War II, and the women of Reggio Emilia wanted to have a school that was a response to the fascist governments that the Italians had during the war. They wanted democracy, and they wanted a school system that reflected democracy. And the women wanted to continue working. And for them to be able to do that, they needed to have early childhood centers. The Reggio educators have been studying how young children learn and have been constantly improving their educational approach for the past 70 years. And it's to them that we look to form the foundation of the kindergarten program here in Ontario. And because of that, we're going to take a closer look at the principles that make up the Reggio philosophy to early childhood education. The Reggio Emilia approach is governed by a few basic tenets. They focus on the image of the child as capable, the classroom as the third teacher, teachers as researchers, children as researchers, the atelier, and documentation, and most of all, locality. I remember in the late 90s meeting educators from Reggio Emilia, and the question that they would always ask people like myself who would say, I'm applying a Reggio Emilia approach, they would say, how can you do Reggio Emilia? You're not in Reggio Emilia. And that's because one of the key features of the Reggio Emilia approach is that it is based locally. Their approach works for them. But we can take the ideas and borrow from their philosophical approach to create an education which is local and responsive to the children that we work with. I thought we would start with a poem by Loris Malaguzzi. This is actually two poems. The poem on the right is written by Loris Malaguzzi and published by the Reggio Children. It talks about the 100 languages that children have and the ways in which they communicate and understand the world, and how we as adults have lost those languages. But it is important, maybe even vital, that in schools we encourage and maintain these many languages that children use and understand. So when we're thinking about children, it's important for us to think about our image of the child. If we think of them as empty vessels to be filled, it changes the way in which you approach education. In Reggio, they see the child as capable, as strong, as intelligent, capable of self-determination, and making educational choices for themselves. They see children as curious and as researchers. And they position themselves in a way that they can learn from the children that they work with. And so if we want to adopt a Reggio-like practice, we need to start with our image of the child and to start to see the child as capable and to ask ourselves, in what ways do we see them as capable? The next principle is the idea of the classroom as the third teacher. One of the questions I always get is, who is the second teacher? We think of the teacher as the first teacher. In Ontario, we have ECEs in our kindergarten classrooms. And so a lot of people think, oh, that must be the second teacher. No, the educators, the ECE and the teacher, are the teachers. It's the children who are also the teachers in the classroom. It's the parents who are also the teachers of the children. But we treat the classroom as the third teacher so that we set up invitations, and the way in which we design the classroom informs the children's practice and provokes their thinking and their ideas. And we set up the classroom in such a way so that children can learn independently in small groups, and so that the classroom acts as a third educator. And it's not just the classroom, but it is the outdoor space as well. And it's vitally important that we spend time outdoors, in nature, with children. But it's important that we are just as intentional about our outdoor spaces as we are with our indoor spaces. And it is just as important that we spend time with our students outside and allow the outdoors setting that we take our students to provoke their learning. Another key principle about the classroom is the idea of democratizing the space. And so making the space one which is co-constructed with the children. It's important that the children have a sense of belonging in the classroom and have the ability to contribute to the classroom. This can mean the children setting up and moving and changing centers. It can mean the children bringing things into the classroom from home or from outdoors. And it means encouraging the children to pursue their own interests and to support them in their inquiries and in their learning. Another key element to the classroom are the materials that we set up in the classroom. These materials need to be open-ended and have multiple possibilities. We need to get away from plastic, single-purpose toys that we often have in classrooms. Here you can see a story that was created by a little girl that was in one of the classrooms that I work in, and how she used natural materials to relay a story, all through the use of open-ended, natural materials, most of which were found in the local area while the children were playing outdoors. So what I want you to do right now, I want to give you a little task, is I want you to gather some materials around your house. I don't know if you have a collection of something, and just play with them and see what the possibilities of that collection of materials is. It could be river stones that you have. Gather them up, play with them, look what you can do with them, and experiment. Maybe you've got a collection of coins, or I know my grandmother always had a collection of pennies that she would use when we played games. And so do that. If you don't have something, go for a walk outside and pick up some leaves in this beautiful fall weather we're having, or pick up some sticks, or if there's a river nearby, collect some river stones and just play with them and see what those materials suggest and what can be done, and add another collection of materials to them and see what that interaction suggests and what are the possibilities. And so I've got a series of questions here for you to think about for when you're working with materials and with children, right? What are the materials themselves suggesting that the children can or cannot do? What big ideas are they suggesting? How can we connect the children's work with each other? And how can we add materials or take away materials to provoke children's thinking so that it goes deeper into whatever it is that they're wondering about? Another important piece to the Reggio approach is the idea of time. Children need large blocks of time to think about things deeply. If you're going through 20-minute blocks in the day, it's impossible to think deeply about anything. It's impossible to really explore and discover new ideas and relationships and possibilities because you're going from one thing to another. So we need to build into our schedule large blocks of time indoors and large blocks of time outdoors. And you can see that when we allow children to sit and we give them time, the beautiful and complex things that can be created. This creation here, you can see a great amount of time and care has gone into its creation. We need to give children large blocks of time. Another principle is the idea of documentation and trying to make learning visible. And so this is an example of one of the teachers that I work with trying to capture the students' learning in her classroom. And so you can see how she has captured some of their words and some of their work to share publicly and to make visible the students' learning and capability. And so we need to see children as researchers, children who are wondering about things. These children here are experimenting and exploring and playing with the ice. And so you can see that they are wondering and curious. And we need to provide them with opportunities so that they can research and learn about the world around themselves. And teachers need to come together to work as researchers as well, so that we can learn from the children and we can learn from each other. We need to share our documentation so that we can get outside of our individual view. And hopefully through sharing with fellow educators, we can gain deeper insights into the children's learning, as well as make even more learning visible. And so this is a brief introduction. Each one of these ideas underlying the philosophy of the Reggio Emilia approach could take a video. The educators in Reggio Emilia have spent years learning from children, and they're still studying, and learning more. This is a journey that can take a lifetime if you allow it to. Here are some resources that I encourage you to check out. Reggio has a fantastic website for educators. I personally belong to the Ontario Reggio Association and the North American Reggio Emilia Alliance, and I encourage you to visit their websites. They're also very informative, and they often have workshops and webinars available so that you can learn more. Anyhow, that's a brief introduction to the Reggio Emilia approach, and I look forward to our discussion in class. Thank you.